What's up? What's up? Welcome to another live episode of Apostate of Mind, a
This is
channel.
this has been so fun to go live.
Yeah. And so we're back at it again. I'm Mark Peralta.
And I'm Anonymous.
And today we've got lined up for you a series of TikToks within the subject of apologetics, creationism,
Proof of God, proof of the Messiah. And this is fun because, TikTok's a good way to spread information, quick little nuggets here and there. And from a believer's perspective, watching TikTok, you're gathering what you believe are evidence and proof of what you believe. But we're going to address some of those TikToks and explain why it may not be proper evidence of that belief and what the actual evidence is saying. So
that's right, because they're just lying to you. So let's
misleading.
See. Yeah, let's expose the cheap TikTok apologetics of our time.
But I remember hearing those same things when I was a believer. So this is important. It's part of the whole deconstruction process to take all those things that you thought were evidence for and slowly reassess those ideas.
Absolutely. So we're going to begin with Steve Cass. I hope we're pronouncing your name right. With absolute proof that God is real. So
proof. Here we go.
Absolute proof.
Here it
is. See. Did you know that this is absolute proof that God is real and the Bible is true? The Saudi Arabian government has finally, for the first time in history, allowed people to take pictures of the true Mount Sinai. This was the mountain that God descended on in fire to give Moses the 10 Commandments. And that is according to Exodus 19, verse 18. This is the actual mountain in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, there's the picture. We can finally see proof of God.
And you do have to wonder why is he addressing it as the true Mount Sinai? And I don't think he talks about it in this video, but I could only assume that it has to do with just the fact that there's controversy as to whether there was actually a Mount Sinai.
Wait, there's not a Mount Sinai right now?
Not necessarily. Not as sure as like there's a Himalayas or
Everest.
Yeah. It's not really. There's debate.
Okay.
And so this is apparently a claim to the actual Mount Sinai.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see why. And then also, I think it's worth mentioning that even in the Bible itself, there's a bit of confusion as to what's the deal with the Mount Sinai, because there are some passages that are they're like doublets. They're retelling the same stories, but as like, for example, Moses going up in the mountain and getting the 10 Commandments and everything, but it doesn't say Mount Sinai, it calls it Mount Horeb.
Oh, so it's not even clear if it truly was Mount Sinai that this occurred on.
Yeah, so not even the name itself.
So it mentions two different mountains.
Yeah, I think it has to do with like what origin, like what tradition, going back to the documentary hypotheses, how you have a Yahwist source, an Elohimist source. I think has to do with that. But we'll see what our TikTok has to say about that. What makes this the true Mount Sinai?
Okay.
And this dark patch at the top is not a shadow. Rather, when seen from the sky, you can actually see it is entirely burnt. But there's even more.
Okay, so we have a mountaintop in Saudi Arabia that's black in color.
Yeah, I think I've seen black mountains before, especially if we're not even sure if that's the exact mountain.
Right. So this is the evidence that 4,000 years ago, just about, this God that exists came down in the form of a fire, burnt this mountaintop, right? So is he implying that the dark black color is because it's something burnt it a long time ago?
Right.
Is that what it is?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and if that were the case, I mean, it would have eroded away if it was black because it was burnt. I mean, underneath you could easily scrape and demonstrate, okay, this was really burnt on top. Because look, underneath, when you scrape off the burnt part, is the regular rock. Where are those pictures? Where is that evidence?
Yeah. So actually, like, I spent some time looking it up, and I found that this one, like many other pseudo archaeology claims out there about like stuff that corroborates the Bible, this one is false, and it's not like evidence of anything that was burnt in there, but rather it's basaltic granite. It's like a form. It's a rock.
And is it black
Yeah.
in color?
It's black.
Oh, so it's just black rock.
It's black rock, and it was identified as metamorphic rock, which means that this could only form like deep under the crust, under intense amount of pressure and heat, where what would have been an igneous rock, so something that came out of like some volcanic or lava or something, was then hit with like immense amount of pressure and heat and made this rock formation, which then later surfaced through like millions of years of plate tectonics and all this and that, and it became the peak of this cliff.
Which would make total sense, knowing how mountains work and how the built up pressure underneath is what creates the peak, and why the bottom metamorphic rock would be on the peak and the top of this mountain.
Yeah.
Nothing out of the ordinary or extraordinary.
I mean, kind of unusual, but not as a result of some burning miraculous event, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a perfect geological explanation for that.
And I have to say, he's saying that the government's allowing pictures. Those didn't look like very good pictures, and it didn't even seem, I don't know, it seemed a little bit graphic to me.
Stitched together.
Yeah.
Right.
Where are the close-ups to show the burnt part?
Yeah, where's the evidence of the burning? Like,
right. That'd be easy to prove. It'd be carbon, right?
You bring like experts on fire. There's people that know like how to investigate. Like if this was actually something that burnt a long time ago, well, where's the scientific evidence for it?
Right.
But no, the evidence pointed towards an actual rock.
Just a picture that it's black. That must mean that's where it is. That means God's real.
And they're banking this kind of rhetoric, because I'm sure he's not the only one that says this, banks on people not actually looking this information up.
Mm-hmm.
They just look at the pictures like, oh wow, how else would a mountain be a dark if not a god burnt it 4,000 years ago?
Right.
So let's see what else is on the line here. Let's see.
Take this. Right next to Mount Sinai is this massive rock with a giant crack down the middle. It's the same rock that God told Moses to hit in order for water to come out of it.
What makes that be the rock?
Yeah, how does he know that specific rock was the rock that this water came out of? I mean, is it the only rock that there's ever been a crack in? Like, aren't all rocks cracked off of a bigger rock? Like, that's silly to say that is the evidence of that is the rock where this water came out of. I mean, where's the evidence of the water flowing out? There would have been water erosion from the rock. Where's the pictures of that?
Yeah. And even if there was, okay, so you have a rock where there was water that flowed out of it. Okay. That's not unusual either in nature. Yeah. That's actually the case in many instances.
Yeah. If you see a waterfall, it's usually coming out of a rock.
Yeah. And water will do things to stone, to anything over a long period of time. Erosion will carve out a whole, the Grand Canyon, for example. That's massive amounts of water flowing through, carving rock. Like, this is not, but maybe in antiquity, people would have seen that and thought, wow, how is this possible?
Right. Wow. It's understandable why somebody primitive would see a waterfall coming out of a rock and be like, water comes from rock, or have been a story where God told somebody to make that happen.
It must have been a miracle.
Right.
Yeah.
Literally talked about in Exodus 17 verse 6. So if you believe God is real and the Bible's true.
Okay. All right. So subscribe to us. We'll break it down for you. Oh, no. Let's see. Let me queue up the next one. I think I'm gonna need to, let's see, remove this one.
The view.
Video file. No, it's not video file. Maybe I need to remove this.
In the second view of this. Us.
All right. Okay, so this next one up is from Sean McDowell.
And he has quite a bit of followers. I can't remember how many, but a lot of people listen to his information.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Sean McDowell, he is the son of, at least when I went to seminary, his dad was like one of the biggest apologists. He's got several books, but I remember it was about this big, The Evidences That Demand a Verdict. And that was like a great resource for like apologists. You know, it's a bunch of fallacies and like, you know, pseudoscience claims and a bunch of misinterpreted stuff, like if you really are critical about it. But
and just the mere fact that you have to dedicate your life to explain away all the problems and all the contradictions in the Bible should give you an indication there's a lot of problems there. This is, you can't just explain away thousands and thousands of contradictions. I mean, you've got to be a little more critical than that.
oh yeah. All right, so Sean McDowell is his son, and he's got a channel. And so let's see how he's going to explain away the Trinity in less than a minute.
The Trinity does not contradict. Now, if Christians said there's one God and three gods, that would be a contradiction.
So I'm wondering how the volume is here. A little low for me. Let me turn it up a little more. Okay, so it looks like he's addressing one of the objections to the reality of a Trinity.
Right.
Which is the contradiction.
The whole 3-in-1 concept. And he's like, well, it's not, we're not saying it's one God and three gods. That would be a contradiction.
Yeah. So let's see how he handles it.
If Christians said there's one person and three persons, that would be a contradiction. But
if they say one person and three persons at the same time, that would be a contradiction. Okay.
That's true.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Let's see.
that's not what we mean by the Trinity. What we mean is
Oh, they don't mean that.
Here's what they don't mean. Well, let's hear what they mean.
So, I mean, why do they have to like get into this is what we mean about it? Like, if we really are just talking about like how many gods are in the universe, in the same way that we could talk about, I don't know, how many, I mean, what would apply perfectly here? How many
Stars? I don't know. Where are you going?
How many one-legged lions exist? Is it 1, 2, 3? Like, do I really have to get into what I mean by how many lions? It's pretty self-explanatory. Are there 3? Are there 2? Are there 10? Right now, how many? There's no need to get into definitions here. It's pretty self-explanatory. So if we're going to talk about gods, how many are there? Let's see.
To be clear, yeah.
is that there's one God, substance, one being, but three persons who share that divine nature.
Wait, where's
Oh,
the
okay.
substance? Where's the substantive God?
Yeah, the substance. Yeah. So that's a term that goes back to like the very early stages of the Christian church, where they had to invent this whole category to talk about God. And it has to do with, I think it's more of a like a Platonic.
From Plato.
It's from yeah. So Plato has a lot of influence on Christianity. It sort of like it's conducive for dichotomies evil versus bad,
Chaos, order,
order.
light, dark.
And it also gets into like the value of things. And it would argue that the material world is not perfect and that there is an immaterial world. And it does so in a way, like if you read about Plato's cave, it's kind of like what they're trying to say is that there's a more real, more meaningful, more important, more an actual perfect world that is not the material world.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's actually the case, then does that category or does that line of thinking apply to God himself? And so there they found their solution, because now they can think of a possibility where you could have a material God and an immaterial side of God that also exists.
Mm. And so
You see
he's
what I
talking
mean?
about the material side of God,
The immaterial.
but the substance of God. He's trying to say that's the material.
No, that's the immaterial side, the essence.
So substance is not really substance; it's essence.
It's, I don't know if he
'Cause
said
to me,
substance. I
substance-
think he said essence. And if he said,
Play it again,
let's see.
because to me, substance
share
is
that
material.
divine nature. You might say there's one what and three.
Hold on. Did I go back far enough? Maybe not.
Three persons who share that divine
A little bit
nature.
further
You might-
back. There you go.
But that's not what we mean by the Trinity. What we mean is that there's one God in substance, one being, but three persons.
Okay, yeah, he did say substance.
So what does that mean? I mean,
I
if
don't know,
that
I
were the
think-
case, there would be proof,
Yeah.
evidence, some kind of visual, observable.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you that like really want to get into it, I think the actual term is, or the argument was made. It was labeled as the homoousios, I think is what it's called,
Mhm.
or the same essence, homoousios.
And he
that
also uses the
Son-
word being.
That the Son partakes of the same essence of the Father, and that's what makes him divine. Why? Because in his material side, in his material essence, he was just a man. He was fully human. So not to take away from his humanity, they had to invent this divinity that is everything but material.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they can take the liberty to define God as this essence that is just one essence, and then explain it away as, well, but you've got three different persons.
I think too, I mean, you don't have to think that they're saying one God versus three gods or one person versus three persons to think this is a contradiction, because we know that being and persons are separate. You can't have three persons in one being. And I know another argument that they try to say is, well, that's how God is. Your little human mind can't fathom the greatness of God. But really, no, you're trying to make us believe something that is not realistic. How can there be three persons or essences in one being?
Yeah. And it just doesn't really work like that. Like if you apply that same logic to another conversation, like let's say we're talking about three persons, three human beings in a room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the story might be. And while they all partake of the fact that they're human beings, you would never describe that as, well, those three people in that room are one being.
Right. Like in marriage,
because
you say,
they partake of humanity.
Right. In a marriage, you say, oh, two are uniting to become one. Well, that's figurative. It's not literal, but you're wanting us to believe in a literal one being, three essences or persons in God. What do you think is really going on? Why is there multiple essences but yet one being promoted in Christianity?
Because they're trying to avoid the whole polytheism claim. Like, is Christianity like, if the Son of God is a fully divine being, then are there more than one God? You see?
And there's a lot of evidence of there being more than one God, especially in the Hebrew Bible. Michael Heiser really in the Christian apologetics world even brings that out, that God made us in our image, because it's our gods, a council of gods, multiple gods, but yet the New Testament's wanting to promote more monotheism, right?
Yeah, because that's sort of like
what's the best God, one God.
That was like what became the it thing at the time. Because initially, I think that Judaism was a little more open-minded to the idea that there were more than one God universe. That Yahweh, while it was their God, was only maybe one of others that created and perhaps reigned and perhaps created other peoples around the world. But then, as time went by, that sort of I think the terminology is monolatry. Was, hey, we need to emphasize the worship and the adoration and the belief of this one God over the others. And then that morphed into, well, maybe it's not about one versus many. Maybe there is just one God, and that became the thing. And that one God is, the God of Israel.
But then when Jesus comes along, and then people are worshiping Jesus, and then it's like, oh, well, he's the same thing. But I thought he was his son. Well, they're all the same. They're all one being. Three people, one being. Like, it's just doesn't.
And you don't get that from reading like the Gospels. You're never going to read the word Trinity in the New Testament, and it doesn't really get into that. All you get is like little hints of the possibility that, or the very likelihood that the Gospels were implying that Jesus was divine, namely through the claim that he is the Son of God. And so that, if anything, posed problems for a monotheism early on. And that's where the Christian theology had to accommodate and make changes. And the doctrine of the Trinity is one of those. You have a dilemma. The New Testament claims that the Son of God was fully divine. So what does that say about the one God?
Right. And how can a God die? And, all those other questions. And how could he kill himself? And those issues that come along with believing in the Trinity. Not to mention that it was so interesting when I went to the American Museum of Natural History in New York this past weekend to see artifacts of what looked like, the typical image of the Holy Trinity, where there's a mother holding a baby, and this was worship. Well, coming to find out, the whole Trinity concept has a lot to Egyptian mythology of Osiris and Isis and their baby Horus. You have Osiris being the god, Isis is the mother, and Horus is like the human child, demigod from the god, who are in essence one, in the sense that Horus will die and then join with Osiris, and then that whole
for sure. I mean, and that's these Egyptian concepts of Trinity, or worshiping three gods, and there being this sort of like special thing about these three, was not original to Christianity. And I'd argue that it preceded Judaism. Judaism corrects that by eliminating any mythology about like where the gods came from, and it just gets straight down to the creation of man. And it's because it's trying to avoid those narratives about like brother and sister gods and what came out of them and so forth.
Right.
And so then here comes Christianity, sort of undoing, in my opinion, what Judaism did.
Wow.
with regards to worshiping multiple deities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense than trying to fit in your puny little brain, as they often will tell you the reason why you can't understand the three persons in one concept. It's because your brain can't fathom it. But no, maybe it's because it doesn't make sense. The reason it doesn't make sense is because it comes from mythology and not real truth.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else, Sean.
Who share that divine nature. You might say there's one what and
I
three.
think I'm showing it. Oopsies. Let's go back a little here.
One God in substance, one being, but three persons who share that divine nature. You might
Three persons who share that divine nature. Apply that to human beings. You got three persons in a room, right, with distinct names and so forth, right,
Yeah.
who share human being. The fact that they're human beings does not make them one being.
Right.
They're still three distinct persons. And you can't make that same exception for the existence of a God.
say there's one what and three who's. Now, why would
Even
Christians
saying
believe
it like that doesn't make sense. Three who's and one what. That's
Yeah. If it's the same,
like multiple personality disorder.
Yeah. If it's the same what, right? Then what died at the cross? The Father and the Holy Spirit as well? Because it's the same what. Just because you've got a different who, like, what is that different who?
Right.
Different name?
Just one little part of him was sacrificed. But then he didn't actually die, because then he went back to being the full who. And so he really sacrificed a what for 3 days.
Or he only sacrificed a who, but not a what.
Oh, that's what I meant to say.
Completely meaningless.
One of the who's and not the what, right?
Yeah. Like, really, guys, if you just get down into it.
Just think critically, and it doesn't make sense.
this? It's simple. Well, the Bible says there's one God, but the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are each divine. But the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah, but if the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are each divine, then you got three gods.
Yeah, and you can't kill a god. That's the whole point of it being a god, is immortal, right? It's divine.
Oh, but only his human side is so then you get into like, okay, how is that possible? Did he like put off his divinity before the cross momentarily and then put it on in the resurrection?
It's like a hat.
Some have said,
human
well,
hat today.
He didn't really become divine until upon resurrection. And that's a possibility. Maybe that's what the early church believed before they got into like what the book of John says, that he existed from the beginning of creation, right? That sounds like John believed that Jesus was fully divine, even and he pre-existed,
right,
before his incarnation, right?
So then they try to say he's only human during the incarnation period, right?
Yeah, but then if he was just fully human and there was nothing divine about his self at the cross, then what about that sacrifice that you're also proclaiming as having like infinite power or infinite value because the Son of God on the cross, and his life is worth infinitely because he's infinite God? That's sort of like what theology does to amp up the human sacrifice aspect of it.
Right. Or they amp it up by saying he was perfect and blameless. Wasn't Job also seen as perfect and blameless, and Noah and these chosen people? So why would it mean that all of humanity's sins would be erased through one person, fully human's death? That doesn't make sense either.
And not to mention how, like, if we really are critical about Jesus' life and what he did and did not do according to like the Levitical law and everything, I would argue that he did not necessarily live a perfect life. because I mean, if anything, he argued for things that were controversial at the time, even today, like when he was talking about like how he's Lord of the Sabbath, and like making the case that it's okay to work on the Sabbath. In other words, it's okay to bend the rules as long as you have good motives, which maybe he was right. Who knows? But still, he's bending the law. He was not necessarily being fully obedient to the Mosaic law.
If he's being held accountable as being fully human.
And having lived a perfect life.
Right.
Yeah. That meant that he should have like participated on every festival, and he should have provided every single sacrifice and offering that he was required as a Jewish believer.
But a believer would say, well, he was above the law because he is the law. Well, that's a problem because he's either human or he's above the law. Which one was it?
Yeah, that just gets really messy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Spirits are distinct persons. That might go beyond our ability to fully grasp.
Your
as
puny
human
little
beings.
brain.
And after all, we should expect this. We're talking about the character of God. But when we
That's right.
Sorry, you can't fathom
they
the
really
character
think that,
of God.
like, if we don't get it, is because we're just not that smart.
Right. And you can't fathom the character of God, but you can say what his intentions are and purpose are for your life.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know somebody's intention, but you can't really know their character?
we properly understand what is meant by the Trinity, there's no contradiction.
That's right. So as long as we give them the opportunity to redefine that in any way they can or they want to be evasive, to use double talk,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no contradiction.
Right.
But no, there is really. It's one is not three is not one. And that whole argument about the essence and all that, it's not perfect. There are many flaws with that, and
Logic
just don't buy it
gymnastics.
anymore.
Yeah. You have to really work to make that square peg fit in that round hole. Well, it's not square, it's square and round, and it's three shapes in one. That's what it feels like we're doing here.
Yeah, for sure.
What about the one with the prophecy? I'd love to get into that.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, let me cue it up because I think it's not up yet. We'll remove this one.
So the next video we're going to get into is a list of prophecies on the prophecies that were fulfilled according to the Bible and how we know that the Bible must be true. If these prophecies, if it prophesied these things and they came to be, it must be true, right? Let's dig a little deeper into what those claims are.
Yeah, here we go.
Here's 3 messianic prophecies that Jesus fulfilled that proves that he is the Messiah. Number 1, Genesis 49:10, Messiah would be from the tribe of Judah. Knowing what tribe you're from the 12 tribes of Israel has been lost to history, so this prophecy couldn't even be fulfilled in today's day and age. Number 2, 2 Samuel 7:12-16, Messiah would be a descendant of King David. The lineage of King...
Okay, so I let it go a little more on the second one because it's really the same thing. To argue that he was of the tribe of Judah, it's also along the same lines of that he would be a descendant of David, who's also a tribe of Judah.
Mm.
And what do we know here? Like, have we been stumped with this? This has been said and argued for so long that Jesus is of the tribe of Judah and that this is what the Bible teaches. And that's like this huge evidence for like he was the fulfilled Messiah, so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But was he really of the tribe of Judah?
Oh, so that's true?
Not so sure. I'm not so sure. And don't even have to go beyond the New Testament to dig a little deeper on this.
Okay.
And I would argue that there are some issues with that, with claiming that he was of the tribe of Judah. And that is, in a nutshell, the Jews were very particular about like who could inherit land in antiquity. Like, if anything, the whole tribal division of the Holy Land, like the 12 tribes and whatnot, is more so not about like the name, but more of like what territory belongs to you and your family, and how that's to be preserved. That was the whole point. Because as you might recall, Israel didn't start as a country. It started as sort of like a group of distinct tribes that then joined together and became this one nation. Okay. So the concept of, or the biblical concept of tribal lineage and how it's legally passed down from one generation to another is very specific. You have to read the book of Numbers. There are some key passages named in book 27. And then again, it picks up in Numbers 32. At the very end of the book of Numbers, it's where we get most of this information. But the bottom line is that when it comes to tribal lineage, the Bible is specific in that it can only be passed down from the father. So it's what's known as a patrilinear descendancy or something like that.
Okay, so what happens if someone only has girls?
Well, so what that means is that whatever tribe your father belonged to, that's the tribe that you end up being a part of.
Okay.
And therefore an inheritor of such land. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what happens in the event where you have only women and no boys to inherit the tribe and therefore the land? Well, there's a Bible passage that has that same scenario, where you have a family where there are, I think, 3 women of this gentleman that was of the tribe of Manasseh. And then the question is, right, do we get to inherit this land? Because the law is already specific as to that it can only be passed down to the males. So what do we do here? And so Moses then communicates with God, and then he gives the commandment, how this is going to play out. And in a nutshell, it's the only way that the women can inherit the land, part of that same tribe, is if they marry other men from the same tribe.
So it still can only pass through the man, only if they're from that tribe.
That's so in the event where there are no men to inherit the tribe, then the women have to marry within their same tribe. If not, then they belong to the tribe of the other person. And the argument in the scripture is basically that if that's not the case, then who's to keep men from other tribes from marrying women from other tribes and then taking up territory, and it would just completely mess everything up. When God has like this very distinct plan as to not only who gets what, but also who's where and why. Like even the position of where the tribes settled around the tabernacle early on was very important.
And so going back to Jesus.
Yeah, let's bring it back to Jesus.
So why does that mean he can't be from the tribe of Judah?
Well, what I think is that the authors of the New Testament Gospels that made a case, because not all of them do. I think it's only Matthew and Luke. Mark is either unaware of this whole tribe this whole tribal lineage being necessary, or he doesn't care about it. The fact is, only Matthew and Luke get into it. They are wrong in that they can't make the case that Jesus was part of the tribe of Judah, because Joseph was of the the tribe of Judah. Joseph, betrothed to Mary, because Joseph ends up not being the father. You see?
So now she's supposed to be the DNA blood, right?
Well, but it doesn't
God's
matter
child.
what tribe the mom was part of. It was completely irrelevant, because tribal lineage is not passed down through the mom. It has to be demonstrated through the father.
So that prophecy could only be true if Joseph was the father of Jesus.
Assuming Joseph was of the tribe of Judah, because
assuming he was,
we still have to, it still is a circular claim for the New Testament author to say that Joseph was of the tribe of Judah, and that's the only evidence that he said it. So we just have a book that says that this Joseph was of the tribe of Judah. That's it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's where the dilemma is. Do we propose an argument for the miraculous conception of the Son of God?
Right.
Which is not unique also, by the way. Okay.
Interesting. There's other demigods born half.
Oh my God, yeah. And you don't have to go very far, because even within Rome itself, there were miraculous conceptions or myths or tales of one of them being Apollos.
So it either was a miraculous conception,
many
in case that prophecy would not be fulfilled, or it was a human conception, and that's the only way that prophecy would be fulfilled. So it's still.
But you don't have a miraculous conception.
Exactly.
Because, by the way, from a Hebrew Bible perspective, a miraculous conception, big shocker, is not part of what they would consider as a messianic requirement. Because from a Hebrew Bible perspective, their expectation of this Messiah was not indeed that it be this divine being, but rather just a human being. Okay.
Interesting.
So they have to invent this because they're accommodating to the times.
Right.
Namely, we live in a New Testament era where sons of gods were conceived. And so Jesus is the one here.
And similarly to King David, it would be passed through the father's blood to be related to King David.
Right.
So that is what makes the second prophecy mentioned also not true.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there are more flaws to the genealogies and all that, but we won't get into those today.
Seemed like you had one more.
King David is another part of history that has been lost, so this prophecy had to be fulfilled in the past. And number 3, Messiah would arrive before the destruction of the second temple. Daniel.
I just want to note too, he keeps saying for both of those first and second prophecies that he mentioned, he just said, well, we don't do the tribal thing anymore, and we don't follow lineage of King David anymore, so that must mean that it's already been fulfilled. Okay, well, it still doesn't mean it was fulfilled by Jesus and that it's a true prophecy.
Yeah, just because
and it has to be fulfilled already.
If that tradition of keeping track of tribal lineages it was over, right? 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, which I would argue, I don't think that's true. But let's assume that's true. That does not mean that because that ended that something must have taken place.
Right.
As if all prophecies are indeed to come true.
But that must have been it. That one that they claimed that must have been true, since we don't even keep track of it anymore.
And if that's the case, then let's get into a conversation as to how come there are so many other prophecies that didn't actually come true.
Right.
About the Messiah with regards to the events of the first century.
That's why people are still waiting.
Yeah.
They're still waiting for the prophecies to be filled, and if all the prophecies really didn't come true, they may be waiting a long time.
Right. And so it doesn't follow that just because time or the possible time that this prophecy would have taken place is already over, then this therefore must be evidence that it did
And that it was
become
true.
fulfilled,
Right,
that
exactly.
it was true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as I mentioned before, I would argue that Jews have kept up with tribal lineages, but perhaps not all of them, but for sure, they still keep track of descendants of Aaron and the tribe of Levi. So you can't really say that that tradition is over, is what I'm saying.
9:24 through 27. The second temple was destroyed in 70 AD. So for this messianic prophecy, these are three of many messianic prophecies that Jesus.
Is it? He just mentioned the whole book of Daniel thing.
Yes. Before you get into that, because I know you've got a lot of good information on the book of Daniel, not being legitimate, but I was also going to say too, he's trying to say that because the prophecy says that the second temple would be destroyed, he's trying to say Jesus must be the temple. That's equivocation. Like, who said that Jesus is that second temple? No, they're making that leap. They're assuming, since that prophecy was done, but they were talking about a literal location, right? A building, not a person. But I know in Christianity, they try to make it very figurative and poetic. And no, it was actually, they were talking about Jesus' body being the church or the temple. But no, they're adding that.
There are some inconsistencies that he doesn't get into here.
And sorry, we're real quick. If that was the case, God should have just said that very clearly.
Yeah.
Jesus is the church that I'm talking about when I say he'll be destroyed. Sorry, go ahead.
And as it turns out, the destruction of the temple did not occur on the same day that Jesus was crucified, as to argue that, you know, he fulfilled that somehow. That the destruction of the temple occurred in 70 AD. So this would have been like 40 years or so after the events of Jesus. So you had, a lot of people don't know this, but you would have had at least 30 years of, even after Jesus' resurrection, where sacrifices took place in the temple and all that was still happening as if nothing went wrong. You see what I'm saying? So just because Christianity has this supposed sacrifice miracle thing that corroborates their religion occur at a time prior to the destruction of the temple, not mean that that's the actual cause of the destruction of the temple. You see, the destruction of the temple has, you got to read more. Like there's the Jewish-Roman War, like that, which has nothing to do with Christianity. Although Christians were considered at the time as a nuisance, but that was not the main reason why these events took place. So what they're doing is they're kind of, this is a ergo proctor type of fallacy where something happened just prior to that meant that was the cause of it, but not necessarily. You see. All right, let's see. What else?
And I want you to mention about the book of Daniel.
The book of Daniel, yeah. So we don't make much of the book of Daniel anymore because scholars have found it to be very unreliable. And I do have some info we can share that I think it's important to know, because it would seem that the book of Daniel could make this prophecy that you'd be like, oh my God, how else is it possible? Now, I do want to mention that if you really want to dig deep in the book of Daniel, the source to check out, and I'm gonna show everyone here on the screen so that you can see what I see. Pull it up. Sorry, I didn't have it ready. Just one moment.
Digital
It's Digital Hammurabi. I just want to share his YouTube channel just to show you how many videos he's already done that talk about and get in great depth. Now, Digital Hammurabi, for those of you who don't know who he is, first of all, where have you been? Because it's a great source.
He's a great source of
Him and his
academic.
wife, they're both ancient Near East experts. And so they're not only familiar with the Bible and the literature of the Bible, like the original languages, but also they know a whole lot about Assyriology and like the Sumerian texts and cuneiform. So these are like really amazing experts on it. You can watch some of these videos that talk about the many problems of not only the message, but the dating of the book of Daniel. And I can summarize some of the points against the reliability of the book of Daniel. And if you care to, dig deeper, then please watch them. One of the main issues with the book of Daniel is, first of all, that he was not the son of Nebuchadnezzar, as Daniel himself states in chapter 5, verse 11 and 18. He was actually the son of a usurper king named Nabonidus, who reigned from 556 to 539 BC.
How do we know that?
So there's just archaeological evidence that states there are records that talk about, just like how Jews had, the Babylonians and the Assyrians kept records of who reigned and who was what.
So the archaeological evidence contradicts the Bible.
It contradicts,
claims.
In that Belshazzar was not the son of Nebuchadnezzar. So that's a big problem. If you think about like this being an inspiration of a god, some attempted to rationalize this by suggesting that Belshazzar was married to a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar, and therefore that's why the Bible understood that to mean that he was a son of Nebuchadnezzar. But there's, of course, nothing in terms of evidence that would suggest that this was the case. Other problems with Nebuchadnezzar relate to his death and the fall of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. In Daniel 5:30 to 31, in the same night that Daniel interpreted the writing on the wall, Belshazzar was killed and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. But historians know that Nabonidus returned to Apollonia to rule before it was conquered by King Cyrus in 539 BC. So that's not even how that history went on. There's an expert that he mentions in the videos that's of significance to this problem. His name is Hartman Delayla. And I'll quote him. He says, "It would appear astounding and incredible that Daniel did not know, or at least present, the true order of the Babylonian monarchs and their successors."
Right. If you're living in that time, how could you get it wrong? It seems like something you should know.
That's right, because he flips one of the empires. He flips the order. So part of the argument against the reliability of the book of Daniel, namely that it was written in the 7th century BC, because that's the only way that this book has any significance. If this book was inspired on, during, or well after the events that it purports to prophesy, then this book is meaningless.
Right.
So let's not make too much about the datings of things that the apologists get into in Daniel 9.
Right. If I say in 2023 that, hey, it's 2018 and I predict that in about 2 years or about a year, there's going to be a virus and all that. And then you use that and say, wow, how amazing. She knew that to be true. Like, she must be connected and have this information that no one else has. But if it was written after the fact, then it's not really amazing or pointing to anything being fulfilled, any prophecies being fulfilled.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's a fraud, you know? And so that's what they're seeing. And not only that, but they're also seeing that you have what's called, I think it's Aramaisms. What that is you have Hebrew words in the book of Daniel that clear influence for the Aramaic, which is a much later language, in the text itself, which suggests that because it has that type of language, that it must have not been as dated, as ancient as it claims to be. You see, it's sort of like if someone were to find another copy of the Declaration of Independence, but on that copy it included words that did not really become part of the language of the people until way later. You do have to question whether or not this was actually written at the time that it purports to have been written.
Interesting. It was influenced by later developments
of the language. And what else?
I kind of, just to give another analogy, it's kind of like having a 1950s movie. It's set in the 1950s, but you've got, your Starbucks coffee and your cell phone. It's like, okay, you're obviously not in that time zone because those things weren't even around back then. So just to give another example.
Yeah, that's
right.
Make
sure do the second view.
And let me finalize this by quoting PhD Collins, who's also an expert on the book of Daniel. He says, the Hebrew in common with the exilic period, most of the 6th century. Right, falls into the range of Second Temple Hebrew, approximately 516 BCE, forward, as exemplified by the book of Chronicles, 4th century, and the Dead Sea Scrolls of the 2nd century. So the bottom line, guys, is that there are many scholars out there that disagree and have real issues. They take real issues with the authorship, the dating of the book of Daniel. So therefore, anything that is being said in there, that you're going to as like this prophecy that was then fulfilled, well, you do have to question it. So, and there are more details about this, but just not enough time. Maybe that could be a future episode.
Yes. That's so helpful. Like I feel like I hear a lot about the book of Daniel when I ask people for evidence of the Bible. They'll mention prophecies out of the book of Daniel. So that information discrediting Daniel is.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Let me see.
Maybe one more.
Yeah, I think this finish it. Let me cue it up. Here we go. Proof that Jesus existed. Okay. Exciting.
This is it, guys. Proof.
Is this proof that Jesus existed? In 1982, Ron Wyatt stumbled upon a find that would change history forever. While exploring the site of Christ's crucifixion, Wyatt found evidence that could potentially prove the existence of Jesus. He uncovered the Ark of the Covenant and noticed a mysterious dark substance that...
Okay.
Wait, he found the Ark of the Covenant?
Ark of the Covenant.
The thing that where did he find it? He found it in the tomb?
Well, that's the thing. There's really no evidence for this.
Yeah, where's the picture of him finding the Ark of the Covenant? From what I've heard, I feel like this was something that has been hidden for years, and people have rumors of this country having it, and these people stealing
Ethiopia.
it, and he just like found it at the tomb while he was investigating. What?
Yeah, no, this was like very early on in like the 20th century, and Ron Wyatt, in my opinion, he's one of those. He's actually not even an archaeologist. He's got a different profession altogether, but he did go out and he traveled and he wrote a bunch of stuff. There's just not evidence of any of it. He's one of those that
He didn't take a picture of the Ark of the Covenant. Like,
he's got pictures, but they're like really blurry. Like, he's got like some pictures, and there's not an ark that you can go visit in the museum.
Yeah.
I think he's the same guy who made the claim to found Noah's Ark as well, Turkey, which I don't think we've covered it here, but we've covered it in the Spanish channel in Nuestra Experiencia Atea. And we talked about how, like, no, there are these geographical features that are just like rock formations, and there's no petrified wood, it's actual stone. It's not like, there's no evidence of Noah's Ark. And Ron Wyatt, I think he was the one who made those claims early on. So this one is no exception. So don't believe this. Prove us wrong, though, if you do have evidence. But
even when they're showing the video, look, this is obviously a graphic image, CGI. Like, if this is, he found it, why not include pictures of it?
Yeah, no, this is
you've got to
like
be critical of what you watch on TikTok. And if it's not the actual pictures of what they're saying, I mean, it should be. If they found it and this is evidence, why not have a picture?
Yeah, and it'd be in a museum, like,
right.
It's, yeah, no.
That had spilled inside. Upon further investigation, the substance was revealed to be blood. With only 24 chromosomes.
Okay, what?
What?
So where did this blood come from?
Oh my gosh.
He's just saying it.
I think blood would have degraded. I don't think that you would have the DNA evidence still like that. Like, even with fossils, like, it's very hard to still have DNA there. It has to be mummified. And anyway.
Yeah, no, this is very unlikely.
Type of blood that only could have come from the mother. What's even more remarkable.
So are they now suggesting that it's possible for a human being to be fully formed and all that with just 24
chromosomes, only the mother's DNA? Yeah. No way.
This is so ridiculous.
Yes.
Jesus would have been so, like, deformed, like, it would have been such a mess. Like, that's not how biology works.
We're not asexual where you just have one person's DNA. Or wouldn't he be, I don't know. Wouldn't he be a woman? If he has.
He would have been like,
I don't know.
I mean, it just doesn't work. Like, no. there's never an opportunity where you have a human being with just 24 chromosomes.
I mean, you can clone a human being, but you still have to have. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. No. Biology doesn't work that way.
No.
And that's assuming that this blood exists.
Right. Where is that? And you should be able to show that.
Yeah. Where's the report?
Is that this blood was still alive. So
wait, what?
Is this proof?
What does that have to do with the blood being alive?
Is that this blood was alive. So is this
that was it?
Okay, so this is just complete baloney. Huh.
Totally.
All righty. Well, folks, let's see. It's been a little bit over an hour, which is right around where we want to keep our live videos.
Yeah. We touched upon many different topics, so I think this is a great start.
Yeah, for sure. And so those of you that we want to thank you, and those of you that will see this video in the future, we appreciate you stopping by.
We love the interaction. If you have any comments to add, whether it's agreeing, disagreeing, this is all about a conversation. So we definitely would love to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we're ignoring certain key evidence that perhaps you know about, let us know. If you wish to argue. I mean, I'm even open to having people come on the video on the live to debate and stuff. Sure. So let us know in the comment section. Also, if you like and enjoy our content, also do let us know by way of hitting that like button and subscribing if you have not already done so. Well, this has been lots of fun. I'm Mark.
I'm Anonymous.
And this has been Apostate
of Mind.